Ringside Rosie, Story 112, Part 1. One afternoon, 2 big pots were simmering away on the stove. Paul was busy canning his tomato sauce. The kitchen smelled so good of tomatoes and spices as I helped him. Out back, we could hear Bubba, the faithful and under-your-feet wiener dog, and his sidekick, Teddy, working on some project. The sound of the hammer and Bubba swearing up a storm filled the air. Wiener dogs are notorious for their foul mouths. The doorbell rang and I went to answer it. When I opened the door, there stood the Sisters of St. Oscar of Myers. They were baring their teeth and growling at me. They have never forgiven me for the time I asked them why the teacher's eyes were crossed. She couldn't control her pupils. "Get out of our way, you giant, dim-witted oaf," they barked. "We are here to see that sweet, innocent, lovable wiener dog." I noticed they had rulers tucked up their sleeves. I guess Bubba hasn't always been a good boy. They raced into the kitchen and let Paul pet them and make a fuss over them. They love Paul. Then they ran into the backyard to see Bubba. We went back to making Paul's spaghetti sauce. Some time later, we could hear the nuns cheering and looked outside to see Bubba and Teddy wrestling. The 2 dogs had built a wrestling ring, and both had capes on and were battling it out. Bubba would climb the ropes and leap at Teddy, knocking him over, while Teddy would lift Bubba over his head and slam him to the mat. After a while, the wrestling match ended, and the dogs all came inside for refreshments. Paul fixed the nuns iced tea, while I got Bubba a scotch, no ice. Bubba has found that ice in his drink while thinking about wrestling makes him ask people why they have never seen a wrestling match, because they come in boxes. Bubba took a few sips and barked that he got the idea to hold a wrestling match with Teddy after remembering a North Side legend, Ringside Rosie. Bubba barked that on November 9, 1958, WIIC Channel 11, Pittsburgh, now WPXI, began broadcasting a weekly wrestling match from their studio in the Fineview neighborhood of the North Side. The executives of Channel 11 felt the program would appeal to the men of this sports-mad city. To their surprise, the program became a huge hit with the grandmotherly, silver-haired ladies that one helped across the street or tipped your hat to at the time. But these gals became as famous as the wrestlers. One woman, in particular, became a Pittsburgh legend, Ringside Rosie. Ringside Rosie's real name was Anna Bopp Buckalew of Lechke Street on Pittsburgh's North Side. She lived in the shadow of the Channel 11 studio. Her sidekick and neighbor, Mrs. Margaret McFetridge, who was one of the first women school crossing guards in Pittsburgh, would scream, "Tear his hair out, Dickie boy! Pull his arm off! Beat his brains out! Watch that dirty rat!" as they rose to their feet to pummel any wrestlers that came near the ropes or jab them with an umbrella. They became as much of the show as the legendary Bruno Sammartino, Jumpin' Johnny DeFazio, Bobby Hurricane Hunt, Killer Kowalski, and Professor Turo Tanaka, to name a few. The sisters, who had been giving Bubba their rapt attention as they gazed adoringly at him, barked that they needed to leave. They ran over to Paul and barked thank you for the iced tea while he petted them all goodbye. One of them lunged at my ankles as they ran out the door. After they left, I told Bubba that I remembered quite fondly my dad and Grandpap Thompson watching and talking about the show. Bubba continued that the show was hosted by Bill Cardille, another Pittsburgh legend, best remembered for his Saturday night show, Chiller Theater. The studio could hold about 300 people, and faces were painted on the walls behind the audience. Was this done to make the audience look larger? No. The cameraman knew that the light was not good enough for television if they could see the painted faces. One executive called the show 90 minutes of unorganized chaos. At its peak, the show's popularity in the tri-state region was topped only by Bonanza and the Dean Martin Show. And those who remember the show may recall Pittsburgh Pirate Hall of Famer Pie Traynor entering the ring during commercial breaks and shouting, "Who can? American Heating Company." End of Part 1.